Batya, what's on your radar?
This week on Real Time with Bill Maher, Vermont Senator and two-time presidential candidate Bernie Sanders joined Maher to discuss his new book, It's Okay to Be Angry About Capitalism. The book has already hit the bestseller list, solidifying Sanders' position among the millionaires who used to excoriate before he switched his ire to the billionaires. Still, and I mean this seriously, who could begrudge the Democratic Socialist a bit of cash in his dotage? I certainly do not. The man is clearly a heartfelt warrior for the downtrodden, someone who has devoted his life to raising up the plight of the have-nots, a man who came from nothing and never forgot those living as he once did. He deserves respect and admiration for it. And yet, while one can cheer on this great American dream story, there is something instructive in how it played out, specifically how Senator Sanders used his talent and fame to write best-selling books and climb the economic ladder, and from his new vantage point, declared that the real enemy are the people a few rungs higher up. Because in a way, this is the journey that the upper middle class has traversed more generally, and it unfortunately blinds many well-intentioned Americans to some of the real sources of inequality in this country. This was all very much on display in Sanders' conversation with Bill Maher. The conversation began with Senator Sanders discussing the theme of his book, which is that right now in America, there is more income inequality than there has ever been in the past. 3 people own more wealth than the bottom half of American society, Senator Sanders told Maher. CEOs make 400 times what their workers do. There's a concentration of power and wealth in a smaller and smaller number of corporations, and 3 Wall Street firms control over $20 trillion. We also have a political system that's been corrupted by money, thanks to the Supreme Court's Citizens United decision. Add all that up, says Sanders, and you get a country which is moving, quote, rapidly into an oligarchic form of society. The middle class declines and the rich get richer, says Sanders. Now, Maher pushed back on a few of Sanders' claims, starting with what would count as a fair tax rate for billionaires. After all, the top 1% already pay nearly half of all income taxes in the U.S. One could also question the narrative surrounding money in politics. There is for sure something intuitively distasteful about it, no doubt. Yet Donald Trump was able to win in 2016 despite being outspent by his rivals, both Democratic and Republican, to the tune of millions and millions of dollars. You may not like Trump nor have wanted him to win, but he's got to inspire a vote of confidence in American democracy, whatever your politics are. Sanders is, of course, right that a lot of people who were middle class in the 70s no longer are. Many Americans and their children have been downwardly mobile. Working class wages stagnated in the 70s, while the costs of the hallmarks of the American dream, owning a home, a secure retirement, choices for your children, have absolutely skyrocketed. NAFTA and globalization more generally resulted in the offshoring of much of our manufacturing, an industry that used to secure middle-class lives for working-class Americans. And now those same communities struggle with deaths of despair from suicide, alcoholism, and overdoses, something Senator Sanders brought up in the interview. Yet when you talk to people in those communities, it's rare that they bring up the problem of inequality as such. Often they admire billionaires and see them as jobs creators. These people just don't have nearly the same level of class resentment for billionaires that credentialed urban elites do. And it's easy to see why. So consider a country in which the poorest person was someone who wrote a few best-selling books and became a millionaire, someone like Bernie Sanders, say, but whose neighbors are all billionaires. You would be hard-pressed to make the case that this society was in trouble, though it was still very unequal. In other words, inequality is really only a problem if the bottom rung is struggling, living a life without dignity due to systematic deprivation of a sort one shouldn't expect in a rich country. Now, I would agree that with Bernie, that is true for all too many Americans. Yet the relevant question for helping them is not how rich are the billionaires. It's do they have access to the American dream? It's not how much more money than them do their bosses make. It's are they paid a living wage enough to buy a home and retire in dignity? And again, Senator Sanders is right. Many truly aren't. But the reasons for that are complicated, and the solutions Bernie has spent his life proposing would actually not do a lot to help them. While the problem Bernie has identified of upward mobility for working class Americans is very real, the solutions he proposes, taking money from the rich to expand the welfare state, are actually designed to sustain the dependent poor in that state, or even on occasion to help the upper middle class. While it's popular on the left to rail against the billionaire set, the truth is that it is the top fifth that has seen the biggest income gains in recent decades, even without the 1%, as Richard V. Reeves has shown. Between 1979 and 2013, the top 1% saw a jump of $1.4 trillion in pre-tax income. But those between the 81st and 99th percentile saw a gain of $2.7 trillion. At least some of the disappearing middle class, in other words, disappeared upwards, joining the ranks of what Reeves calls the dream hoarders, from where this new oligarchy decries the billionaires hoarding all that wealth and demanding it be redistributed. And how much money a year puts you in the top 20%? Well, of course, it varies state by state, but on average, it's somewhere around $125,000 a year. Not coincidentally, the upper limit for qualifying for President Biden's student loan forgiveness program that Bernie heartily endorses. Bill Maher actually specifically asked Bernie about this on his show. Consider the following exchange.
This is a survey student loan forgiveness recipients. 73% of applicants say they are likely to spend their extra money on non-essential, including vacations, smartphone, drugs, and alcohol. They admitted that to the pollster.
Who is this pollster?
NBC News. 52% they are very likely to buy new clothing. 46% they would use the money for vacation and eat out at restaurants. This is why people have a thing about, I would never call it free money. Oh, I guess I just did. But
well, let me respond to that in two ways, Bill. You talk about giveaways. Under Trump, the Congress voted for $1 trillion in tax breaks for the richest people in this country and the largest corporations. That's a giveaway. We just increased military spending with very little discussion, I don't know if you know this, by $80 billion.
Sanders also had this to say.
Military-industrial complex.
Including the Democrats.
Pardon me?
The Democrats vote for it, too.
Yes, absolutely correct. Absolutely right. All right.
But that's socialism, the military. That's crony socialism.
Well, that's
right?
Crony capitalism.
But the military isn't capitalism. That's the government.
No, but it's who owns the military-industrial complexes. All right, but anyhow.
Right.
All right. So when you talk about giveaways, you have major corporations in this country that make billions in profit don't pay a nickel in taxes. Billionaires have an effective tax rate lower than that of a truck driver or a nurse. You have a generation, you talk about this younger generation right now. I got around the country and I talked to a lot of people. You know, I don't know anything about that poll, but I can tell you, I've talked to nurses who are working their asses off, doing the right thing. They leave school $70,000 in that. They can't afford now to get married and have children. They can't afford the housing that they desperately need. So the truth is, you got a generation that, everything being equal, the younger generation will have a lower standard of living than their parents.
We had to cut part of that for timing purposes, but notice how when asked to defend giving money to people who would use it on things like vacations and eating out, Senator Sanders pivoted to whataboutism. What about Republican tax cuts for the rich? What about the military? The argument he seems to be making is because we give tax breaks to corporations and billionaires, we should also give them to early career lawyers and accountants and professors and dentists. This isn't a working class policy. Of course, there are some people who took out thousands of dollars in loans and then dropped out of college who don't have the benefit of a degree in a marketplace that uses one as a gatekeeping mechanism, yet they still have the burden of the loans. And these people absolutely deserve some kind of assistance. Yet those who graduate, even with the burden of loans, remain much more likely to become homeowners than Americans with just a high school diploma. Since 2010, the share of American homeowners with a bachelor's degree increased by 18%, while it's gone down by 13% for those without a degree. The median salary of someone with a bachelor's degree is more than double that of someone with a high school diploma. Despite student loan debt, a college degree is a strong and growing indicator for becoming a homeowner. So it's really misleading to cast college grads as those struggling to attain the American dream when they are the ones most likely to be achieving it and even hoarding it. Now, you might say that another one of Sanders' signature proposals is designed to address just this problem, his push for free college. After all, if everyone gets a degree, surely everyone will then have access to the profits of the knowledge industry. Unfortunately, it's just not that simple. A lot of people are not suited for college. More importantly, perhaps, there just isn't a glut of jobs that actually need a college education to go around. The growing industries in the US include manufacturing, service industry jobs, trucking, and caretaking jobs. Someone has to do those essential jobs, and they should not be treated like less than just because they have chosen to devote their lives to them. Not everyone can be a programmer or a filmmaker, though certainly we should stop importing foreigners to do those jobs and make a push to educate more Americans who want them. And yes, there's plenty of untapped potential in neighborhoods without access to equal opportunity. That should be our focus. Instead of focusing policy on making life easier for more and more upwardly mobile college graduates who are actually already doing very well in this country, instead of continuing to hammer home some kind of values-based connection between dignity and college, or worse, handing out the taxpayer dollars of truckers and waitresses to college grads so they can go on vacation, our efforts should be focused on making sure that jobs that don't require college secure a dignified life. In other words, unfairness is not always injustice, and you cannot tax your way to a solid middle class. It is no defense of billionaires to say that the real class divide is not between the billionaires and everyone else. It's between the top 20% and the bottom 80%. While millennial college grads may take longer to buy a home than their parents did, they are still highly likely to follow in their parents' upper middle class footsteps. Meanwhile, life for working class Americans is increasingly precarious. What they need is not charity from billionaires. They need access to affordable, single-family homes, to vocational schools, and to safe neighborhoods where their kids can thrive. No doubt, we need to do better at ensuring every American has health care and helping the dependent poor, but that will not create an upper pathway for seekers of the American dream. Now, Robbie, I told you before my radar that I thought you were going to like it a lot. How did I do?
I don't even know what to say. You took the words right out of my mouth. I co-sign your entire thesis there. Yeah, I think it's true that sometimes the focus on economic inequality is a way of getting around questions about, I don't think it's so much that people resent wealthier people or people who've been successful. Maybe they resent them if they got their wealth illegitimately, as some wealthy people do by taking advantage of the system or rigging the game in their favor, and that's something I share the left's passion in trying to root out. But the real question is the actual condition of people who are not wealthy good enough and getting better over time? And in many ways it does. There's less globally. There's less starvation than there has been in previous centuries. But in narrower cases in America, right, education costs have gotten a lot worse. Healthcare costs have gotten a lot worse. So let's think about smart ways to tackle those problems, rather than kind of sweeping condemnation of success, which, to your point, working class people don't share. But anyway, we'll leave it at that. Great job as always, Batya, and we'll have more Rising in just a minute.